I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Hello and welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James, and I get the distinct honor of coming to you and bringing you women that inspire me, women that are change makers, and I believe they're way showers. I think this is the time on the planet where women are emerging, and there's an awakening in our consciousness that we are here to love, support, honor, nurture each other so that we can bring more balance and harmony back to this planet. So I'm grateful that you're here. I do this every week. You meet a new woman. We're on all the platforms: Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon, Video, YouTube. Just look for Women Awakening with Cynthia James. You can also go to cynthiajames.net. That's my website. There's lots of gifts and information. You can sign up for my newsletter or my private community. So today, I have a new guest, new to me. Her name is Sue Brightman. She's an author, a women's leadership coach, a conscious business consultant. Sue is here to help women respond to their highest calling in the world, blasting out of the water worn out narratives about women over 50 and supporting the new emerging century of women's leadership. Her research, writing, and services are aimed at shifting the balance of humanity's direction through affirmation and support of women. With 30 years as a conscious business consultant and organizational change expert to company giants such as Shell, General Motors, Huffington Post, Pulitzer newspapers, and then giants in the tech, healthcare, and services industry, she's pivoted to work so that she can focus on breakthroughs to new tracks being laid down by women. After interviewing 100 women in adulthood too, and identifying key themes at this stage, she wrote Amazon best-selling book, A Call to Further Becoming, the New Declaration for Women Over 50. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm delighted to be here talking about awakening and women.
Well, it's thrilling, and I have a lot of questions I want to ask you. But first, where did you grow up? How did you emerge on the planet? What was your life like?
I love that way of asking it. Emerging on the planet. I emerged in upstate New York and lived there for most of my years, all of my years up until going to college, Ohio, and then I've lived in many, many places since then. So I consider myself at home almost anywhere that I am. But right now I'm based in Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, that is so great. Yeah, I'm a traveler too. If people look at my life, they'll go, could you make a decision about what you were going to do?
But we take our home with us, and
Yes.
we learn how to do that, don't we? When we're really centered within, we take our home with us. So I like to think about those of us who are on the road a lot as doing that.
Yeah. And so did you grow up in a family that was supportive of women, or did you kind of navigate that energy in your own life?
That's such a good question because I grew up in a family where, of course, in my demographic at my age and what was happening for women at that time, my parents came out of the Depression, of course. Women were not self-actualizing in the way that we are now, right? And so I was a natural born leader, Cynthia. I just leadership and being leaderly was part of who I was. And this was a bit disconcerting to my mother,
For
who,
sure.
right? What do you do with a child like this? My sister was not that way at all. And so I kept bursting into these activities that I wanted to lead. I think my mother didn't quite know what to do with me, and I understand that. And so my parents, my dad in particular, very, very supportive of the activities that I got into, the things that I did early on that were sort of leaderly in junior high school and in high school. My mother had a little bit of challenge with it, and that offered me the challenge of figuring out how to deal with that when all of my proactivity was not necessarily supported. And again, for reasons that I understand about her own upbringing. So I had to make my way. And those early experiences of a dad who was delighted to take me fishing and knew that I wanted to experience boating. And I had a lot of balance between feminine and masculine qualities. And he was able to embrace and celebrate all of those. The experience with my mother just gave me some seasoning early on that has frankly helped me through the rest of my life.
Yeah, totally get it. Well, you're a baby boomer too, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And so it was interesting because I think a lot of us who are baby boomers came on curious. And and so what we're watching today is so many people who are in this demographic that are kind of bursting out of old paradigms, creating new things, and were change makers when they were little, and not everybody understood it.
And we didn't understand it either.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think this is an important point, and it's an important point for baby boomers and women in particular right now who are over 50, that we are finding ourselves pioneering some things that we don't necessarily recognize we're pioneering. When we're the curious ones, when we're the ones who are doing different things and maybe finding ourselves feeling a little alone in it, we don't necessarily recognize that we're pioneering a new paradigm, new tracks, as I call them. So I think that's exactly what's happening with baby boomer women now.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible. So I want to know I mean, you've had quite an impressive career. How did you get into, you know, business consulting and working in leadership and with all these companies? How did that evolve?
I started out as a social worker. So my original heart and my career path was social work, and I worked in the industry, if you will, of protect child protective services. So now, what that did for me, Cynthia, is it presented very early on in my career, facing the wide swath of the human condition. I'll put it that way. I
Yeah.
was very early on dealing with, meeting with every day families that were extremely challenged, women raising children who were extremely challenged in many different ways. And I thought my whole career trajectory would be social work. That's where my heart was. I was born a sociologist, curious, like you're talking about. And I realized after some years, 5 years in that work, that I was going to burn out. I was going to burn out. I recognized that gratefully. And I had this deep feeling that there was a different way that I could use my inclinations and my love for people, and also the quality of loving to listen and discern and figure out how I could use myself to help humanity, if you will. I know that's a trite phrase, perhaps, but that's really what my inclinations were. And interestingly, at the time, I happened to, that I call it the divine law of coincidence, the divine law of coincidence. I happened to open a newspaper that happened to have an advertisement for what was then called a personnel representative, now as human resources, for an international newspaper in Boston. Long story short, I was living in Texas, married to a Texan. I'm talking about boots and hat and several acres, raising ostriches. I mean, we were Texans. I was working in protective services, but this ad said that they were looking for someone who could work in personnel at this international newspaper, who had experience in working with a wide variety of people and who discerned qualities of others that might be helpful in the hiring process. And I read that and I recognized myself.
Wow.
I would almost say I was lifted, catapulted, carried along with a willing husband at the time to Boston, where I went to work for an international newspaper and eventually became the manager of employment and employer relations for a 3,000 person organization. So there was the ability for somebody in that role to understand transferable qualities, transferable skills. She used that phrase with me, and I thought another divine law of coincidence that there's this discernment about the transferability of our skills. And I took off into business.
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, my oldest son is a social worker. And so I just want to bow to you right now because it is not for the faint of heart. You are dealing with people um, who oftentimes are in survival. And so bringing your heart and your consciousness there, but being able to know that you could expand that was incredible. And by the way, how lovely that your husband was willing to go with you. You
Yes.
don't have an accent.
Because I've lived so many places since then. My career continued. So I was in Boston. We were in Boston for 5 years, and then adopted our two older children while I was working in this managerial role and moved back to Texas. And since then, as a single parent, eventually, I have lived many places.
So I just want to talk about synchronicity for a moment
Mm,
because I adopted both of my children
mm.
and became a single mom. So I often feel like the women that come on this show that we're from some like talk about divine sisterhood, that we've all known about each other, but now get to meet.
Yes, I think that's so true. Synchronicity, we know that it happens. I would say, and that you and I both work so extensively with women, that women really understand synchronicity, intuition, that kind of coincidence that is beyond just luck.
100%. So I want to talk about your you're interviewing these women and the creation of this book. Why why did you want to focus on women over 50?
Yes, because I was one at the time. And truly, my story, I think, is a universal one. And that is that, to your point earlier, I had this marvelous career working around the world in conscious business, which I became deeply trained in with Fred Kaufman. Loved my work, loved travel, loved my clients. And I reached this point in my late 50s where I could feel things coming to completion. I didn't plan it. I didn't sit down and do a strategic plan. Now, some people do that and that works, but for me, it was a discovery, not a decision. And literally, when I was waiting in the winter to fly to Canada and do a keynote speech to a client that I love about this topic, conscious business, that I loved, but I didn't love winter travel. And I didn't love some of what went with the pressure and the schlepping, I call it, of all the things one takes with them when doing a keynote, all of that. I was sitting at a traffic light, Cynthia, and traffic lights aren't very long. I sat there at a red light in the winter in Boulder, and I was thinking about this work coming up, and I had this deep voice in me that said, Sue, I think you're done with this. And the second follow-on voice was, and you're not quite ready to hear it yet. Both of those things were true. The light turned green. I kept driving, but I knew that message was preparing me for the completion of a career I loved, and I didn't know what was coming next. What was coming next was my curiosity about all the other women that are in the exact same place, especially over 55.
Okay, so I have to tell you this. So I was a minister at a successful community. And at the 11th year, at the end of a Christmas service, I started to walk off the stage, and a voice within me said, "You're done here." And I went, what what does this mean, right? So I just want to say to anybody listening, you have a powerful intuitive inner guidance, and it comes to you in different ways. Like both of us just said, it was an inner voice that spoke. But sometimes it comes as a thought, sometimes it comes as a dream, sometimes it comes in journaling. It doesn't matter how it comes, but what's important is that you learn to listen to it. So after you interviewed these women, talk to me about this book, A Call to Further Becoming.
Yes, I'd love to. I decided because of what my own experience was, I wanted to know exactly what was going on for those of us who were at this stage of knowing that we're done with something, not knowing exactly what is up ahead, and the reality that we're pioneering a new stage of life. I want to say, as an aside, an important one, Mary Catherine Bateson, who's a cultural anthropologist, rather, says that there's a whole new stage of life, Cynthia, and it's called adulthood two. We no longer go from adulthood to elderhood, but adulthood two is between 50 and 70 plus plus. And I said, I want to know exactly what's happening in this new stage. 100 women, 6 different countries, diversity of backgrounds and ethnicities and religions and industries. And I really wanted a swath of women who were very diverse so that when I got done with 100 interviews and 700 pages of notes, I would know what the themes were. That's what my book is all about. It's the themes, the 10 key themes that are actually the new tracks that we are laying down as pioneers in adulthood too. So my foray into those interviews and listening, deeply listening for what the themes are, deliver a very promising message about the fact that we're so not done. To your question about further becoming, I juxtapose the notion of further becoming from language about conscious aging, aging in place, aging gracefully, because the emphasis in those phrases is aging. What I saw in my interviews and what I see with all the women I work with is what we're really doing is further becoming all of who we are, right? And so listening to the call of further becoming is really about being all that we can be and doing what is ours to do, because that's what we were born into. It is not this decline, right, into invisibility and going gray and going away. Going gray, by the way, is fine, but going away is not for a lot of us. We have so
Right.
much to give and so much we want to contribute. So further becoming is where I put my emphasis for women.
Well, I love that. And I gotta just tell you, what I have been witnessing is that this group of women has redefined age in the way we look, the way we dress, the things we're interested in, the ways we're moving in the world. And I feel like I don't think I ever thought of it as a further becoming, but it is. It is. So if you were to mm, have someone sitting in front of you
Mhm.
and you were going to, and they're over 50 and they're in the question of what's next, what would you be talking to them about?
One of the things I'd be talking to them about is that word you brought up earlier about curiosity and also intuition. What is speaking to you that you love, that you are attracted to, that feels like a whole body yes, that causes you to want to step closer to it. Whether it makes sense, it may have nothing to do with climbing a ladder, making a name for yourself, a next logical step in a career, but rather, what is it that deep within you feel attracted to? And your intuition, maybe just as I call it a blurry star, Sometimes it's a blurry star that twinkles. We don't see it clearly yet, but there's something there, and afar off, we sense that we're being called or pulled toward whether it's work, whether it's a deep spiritual study and not continuing in a work frame for the moment, whether it's moving house, frankly, whether it's changing relationships or building new, what I call exothermic relationships. So I help women first tap into what is it that when you're quiet and maybe you're walking in the woods or you're sitting in your favorite chair at home and you're not trying too hard to listen, but thoughts are coming, right? I think it's spiritual intuition. That's what I call that. What is it that you feel attracted to? And beginning to trust that. That to me is the starting place. And I have some stories in my book about how women have leaned into that intuition. Also, the clarity about knowing what we're done with. So I love exploring with women what's not important that used to be. And oftentimes, that question, Cynthia, leads to what we just know in our gut that we're done with. That's helpful in clearing the way for what might you be being readied for.
Yes. It's so interesting. I take people on pilgrimages and a lot of them are baby boomer women. And one of the things I tell people is that use this time to open and become receptive to what wants to be released and what wants to come in.
Mm. Exactly. Beautiful. Oh, beautiful. And your pilgrimages, what a gift. What a gift to carve that time out and lead women into that space where they give themselves permission through you to do that. It's critical, I think, at this time when we are indeed pioneering a whole new territory.
100%. All right. Well, I want to know, how do people find you? How do they get this incredible book? Let me say the title again: A Call to Further Becoming, the New Declaration for Women Over 50. How do people find you?
First, they can find me on my website, SueBrightman.com. And the book, A Call to Further Becoming, is on Amazon. It's on Bookshop. No, yes, Bookshop, Barnes and Noble. And oftentimes women can order it at their local bookstores if they wish to do that.
Awesome. All right, ladies. Uh, I would say go get this book. Just the things you're talking about make my heart smile. So I I think it's powerful. So this show is called Women Awakening, and I ask the same question for every guest to conclude this show. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening at this moment on the planet?
I think the most important thing is that women, particularly women over 50, understand how incredibly important their contribution, their spiritual inspiration, and all that they are is to the future of humanity.
Yeah. Well, you are so wise and so powerful, and I'm so grateful that you came here. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad to be with you, Cynthia. Thank you.
All right, ladies, I say the same last thing to you in different ways every time. Wow, what if you knew there was a further becoming? What if you knew that you were essential? What if you knew you were powerful and here for a reason, and that there was a divine spark within you that was moving you forward to bring more gifts, more light, more talent, more power to the planet? What if you knew that? I think if you knew that, you would be a change maker beyond your wildest imaginings. So thank you so much for being here. I love you, and I'll see you next time.